Hiya, welcome to episode 6 of the GodCentral Podcast. Today I'm joined by David Chawner from Sports Chaplaincy UK. We're going to be talking about the work that they're doing in sports clubs up and down the country. We're going to be discussing mental health in both, again, local sports and elite level sports. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Right, we'll just jump straight into it. Hello, David. How are you?
I'm feeling okay. I think, as far as I know, I'm in reasonable health. And yourself, Rob?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yeah, you just watched rugby?
Yes, I have. I've just come hot foot from watching England beat France, which was after a minute when France were already 7 points up. I was beginning to not panic about, but think, oh, this could be bad. But actually, it was an excellent game. Enjoyed the game, whoever was going to win it, and really pleased that England have got a win at last.
Yeah, fast-paced game as well, that one. It
was good open rugby, and it was good. It was entertaining. So much rugby union these days, it's not entertaining. It's men running into each other. The women's game is more entertaining from that point of view, because they tend to try and run around each other. Most of the time, the men's game, they're running at each other. So, but it was good. It was fast. It was open, and there was some great skill on display, both on attack and defence. So it was good. Enjoyed it. Do
you think that's because of? There's always been big rugby players, but generally now, I think it's like nutrition and stuff like that has become so prominent in professional sports that players are massive now. Every single player is massive. Do you think tactics have just changed now to be more of a, like you said, run at the opponent instead of worrying about trying to play more skillfully?
I think we've got that way, phases and all this sort of thing, and playing in certain areas of the pitch, which is important, but that takes over from everything else. I think one of the things the French have always gone for a more open game. We've got obsessed in the UK with size and bulk, and the guys are fit. Don't get me wrong; they can run fast. But I also remember when I was chaplain at London Wasps, we had a player, quite a well-known player, come from France. And the guys were kind of shocked in the gym at his not lack of ability, but he couldn't lift the sort of weights they were lifting. When you saw him on the pitch, he scored so many tries because he was always on somebody's shoulder when they made a breakaway because he got the speed. And traditionally in France, they've focused more on speed and athleticism, and we focused on bulk to the exclusion, I think, at some points of that.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that's the way. Well, for me, it's a shame anyway, but that's the way the game was going because I appreciate a bit of skill, I like to see some, but then don't get me wrong, I'm a bit of a bloke and I like to see guys just running into each other as well. So it's a bit of a
good tackles, but just running into each other but not trying to do anything else is a bit boring after that. And if we want the game to be more widely known and people to enjoy it, then it's got to be entertaining. And that game today was entertaining. And hey, that really sort of made me feel good. And that's what sport is about at the end of the day, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll touch on that a little bit later on as well. Yeah. So you're a trustee, right, for Sports Chaplaincy UK?
I'm chair, actually, at the moment, I'm chair of Sports Chaplaincy UK, have been for nearly 9 years now, although I'm stepping down from the chair coming to the meeting in June, but I'll still be a trustee, yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Have you always known God? Did you come to God, later on in life or a different time?
I come from Nottingham originally. I was brought up in a Baptist church. My family were all involved. My grandparents were involved. So it was a long line. My great grandmother actually died on the steps of the chapel. I don't think the sermon was quite that bad, but I even found a clipping on a local newspaper online saying that had happened. It was a family story, but I've got evidence of it now. So yeah, always been surrounded by that, by faith and the Christian faith, obviously. And it was, Jesus was very much part of everything around me, and I never thought to question it really. I think there was a point at which, and this will sound an odd story to some people, when I was 11, both my grandparents died within a very short time of each other, but it was after my grandmother died. My father and grandfather had been to the hospital early in the morning. It was a Saturday morning, and I was still in bed when they came home. They'd been out very early, And my father came and told me that my grandma had gone to be with Jesus. Now, in some ways, that's one thing you're not supposed to, but you can make children think that Jesus has taken their, relatives away from them, and it can be something that's not always advisable. But in my case, it really struck home, and it was just natural. I never thought of it as anything other than that. Was made a commitment it was a Billy Graham film was being shown in another local church that we went to as a group when I was 12. I don't know whether I fully understand it. Well, I didn't fully understand what was happening then. I mean, I understood the faith, as it were, but really, when I went to university, it became real. I got baptized at that point. When I was 18, I would have been when I was baptized, and since then been surrounded by it. From an early age, people said to me to think about going into the ministry. Was something I never wanted to do, and in a sense still don't. But ultimately, by a long and complex story, which I won't bother you with, I wanted to be a vet from the age of 12, trained as a vet at Edinburgh University, was in practice for 7 years. And then a series of circumstances made us think, maybe we should think of going into, certainly we were convinced I should go into full-time theological training, to some form of full-time service, Christian service. But I was convinced at that point it shouldn't be the ministry. And there have been various points along the road when the whole idea keep coming back. God doesn't let go. That's one of the really annoying things about God. Once he gets his grip into you, he doesn't let go. He's tenacious, which I love in one way, but you try to dodge him and it's very difficult. So eventually went off to studied in Switzerland, actually, at a Baptist seminary now, which is now moved to, it's in The Hague now. And the language was English, I hasten to add, so I'm not that good. Then while doing that, worked in a church back in Scotland for 2 summers. And at the end of the first summer, the minister and elders were to give a report to the college as to what I'd done, etc. And they said to me, we really believe you should be in the ministry. And by that time, I'd become convinced myself, as I said, much against my own will, but it really seemed to be God's will that's where I should be. And that's where we were. Finished that training, went to London, to West London, Ealing, to a Baptist church there in 1981, and was there for 25 and a half years. And it was while there that I got involved in sports chaplaincy at the turn of the century. Yeah. So that's my story in a nutshell. So faith has always been around me. It's part of my life. I've never known anything else, really. And in some ways, I've spoken to many folk, people who come to faith from completely outside have a completely different view in a sense. It's new, it's fresh. It's always been around me. And I say envy that. I can see they've got something which I can never have, but they would equally turn around and say, well, you've got something we could never have, which is that whole background, biblical teaching, everything else, Sunday school, boys brigade, Bible class, all those things, which add to, really. So, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for my life. I think I've had a really blessed life in so many ways, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I just thank God for the life I've had, really. I feel terribly privileged, to be honest.
I suppose that's the most important thing, isn't it? Being grateful for the way it's, the way it's turned out anyway. I mean, I'm that guy. I'm not the guy you speak of. I come to God in my early to mid 20s. So my wife, she's always, she's always known God. And sometimes I'm a little bit jealous of, just the way she quickly roots back to him. Well, she has her moments, don't get me wrong, but she seems to process quickly about how she should be thinking, whereas I have to go through the process. Do you know what I mean? I have to go, well, why has he wanted it to be this way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does that make sense? So yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. And I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one. It's strange, isn't it? How you get sucked into helping. We turned up at GodCentral back in 2016, I think, and we very much wanted to go under the radar. And I think since then, I just ain't stopped. It's been, youth work and podcasts and editing videos and social media stuff now. Yeah, just busy, really busy now. So you say you got involved with sports chaplaincy while you was I've gone blank. Sorry, back in London, wasn't it? Sorry, back at the London Wasps. And how did that come about? How did you get involved with Sports Chaplaincy UK?
Sport has been another sort of area of my life, really, right from the beginning. Particularly team sport. I was brought up to enjoy sport. I was surrounded football, cricket. My grandfather was a great influence on me in that respect. And although my father was very much into those as well, my father was into rugby. He played rugby at school. So I watched internationals and that. And then when I went to grammar school, that was a rugby playing school. If the sportsmaster caught us playing football, we were in deep trouble. He was one of those. So got into rugby then and other team sports. So it's always been around me. I knew of sports chaplaincy. I knew of what is now Sports Chaplaincy UK. It had a different name then, but I knew of the organisation. I knew the guy who headed it up, but hadn't thought of getting involved. And then the church where I was just along the road from the London Wasps training ground. And they trained at that time, they shared that ground with Queen's Park Rangers. And Queen's Park Rangers had a long history of chaplaincy.
Okay.
And the guy Nigel Melville, who was headed up Wasps then, was a head coach. He saw this and thought, that's just what we need. He approached Sports Chaplaincy UK and asked them to, find a chaplain for him. And I was originally brought in, consulted, because I was a great friend of the guy who was one of the chaplains at QPR. He suggested they talk to me, and I had a wider sort of link Baptist-wise and ecumenically locally. So I was involved in helping them try to find somebody. And as a result of that, eventually we didn't find anybody, but came back to me and said, what about you? And in a sense, I didn't need a second invitation. But the interesting thing about it was that my wife was one of the few jobs, our wives usually are a good conscience, aren't they? I've never worked out why my wife knew God's will before I'd even started thinking about it. She said, you should do it. And my friend at QPR said, this is your job. This is your job. And but I was very involved in other things. I got a wider responsibility Baptist-wise at that point across West London. And so I went to the elders, we talked it over, and they said, yeah, that's fine, but you need to give up something else. So I gave up that particular responsibility and took on the WASP job. That was in 2001.
Okay.
There for 11 years till I retired in 2011 and then moved up to Northampton where I am now. So that was how I got involved. And so I got obviously more. And then in 2007, I left the local church and went full-time with Sports Chaplaincy UK, developing rugby union chaplaincy across England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland. It was really a great thrill to do that for 4.5 years until I retired in 2011. And then moved to Northampton, where I'm now chaplain at Northamptonshire County Cricket, which is great. It's a great privilege. And cricket, of all team sports, I think will be my first love.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But never been any good at it. But yeah, any team sport almost you'll find me watching. Yeah.
So back in 2001, when you took up the role, were sports chaplains, were they commonplace amongst, like you say, team sports, or was it a kind of new thing? Or?
No, Sports Chaplaincy UK itself started as an organisation in 1991, and how that happened was that the guy called John Boyers, who was an assistant minister in a church in Watford, which was just down the road from the Watford Football Club, and somebody came to the church to talk about outreach and mission, and said to him, have you ever thought about contacting Watford Football Club? It's part of your community. It's here. And John was very keen footballer, played, etc. Still at that stage. So he contacted the club, and it was Graham Taylor who was the manager, and he immediately grabbed at it. He'd put an advert, that's right, in the paper saying anybody want to volunteer to help them. They were looking to get the community more involved. So John wrote in, and they picked it up, and John became chaplain there, and he then became aware of one or two others around, guys. Some of them are still active, actually, amazingly. Who were doing chaplaincy. There'd always been some chaplaincy in sport, but it was often the sort of president of the club or the chairman of the club who brought in happened to know the local vicar or whatever, and brought them in. And it was a very formal role, grace at the annual dinner and all this sort of thing. But what John was doing was very much involved with the squad. John actually trained with the squad. I've known one or two that do that, but most of us keep away from that sort of daft idea these days. And there's some good stories of John, when there was a ball got lost in a canal once, and they suggested he should walk on the water to get it, and all this. But it was great because he got to know the guys, got a very close bond. But he found that one or two others who were doing similar things, not to that extent necessarily in that way, but doing a relational job across the whole club, players, coaches, backroom staff, everything. And somebody said to him, why don't you try and sort of form these folks to, get these folks together? Well, he was still an assistant minister in the local church and etc. So his time was limited. And eventually what happened was, he was a Baptist minister, and the Baptist Union said to him, look, if you want to do this, here's 6 months worth of money to set you off, see if you can make it work. And from there, the whole thing has grown. Now, at that point, there were probably just a handful, mainly in football, all of them in football, which is still our biggest sport because it's the biggest sport in the country. It's the major sport in the country. But from that, in 1991, we're now 30 years down the line, and we've got somewhere between, just over 550 chaplains across the country and growing. Just last night, there were 2 new ones appointed down in Wales, would you believe? So it's growing all the time and growing across many sports. We're both male and female sports, disability sport, all ability sport. One of the latest sports we've got into up in Scotland is shinty, which is played in the far northwest of Scotland. It's sort of a bit way out there. I
don't even know what that is. I've got to be honest.
Well, you've heard of hurling in Ireland?
Yeah.
It's almost a Scottish form of that. There's a thing called the Chawner Cup, which is competed for every year by the hurling champions and the shinty champions against each other. Okay. It's like a rough form of hockey.
Rougher generally seems to be the way in Scottish sports, doesn't it?
Yeah. But north of Fort William, there are no football clubs. Northwest of Fort William, it's all shinty, funnily enough.
Right, okay.
It's very interesting from that point of view. So a whole range of sports now, not just team sports in athletics. There's somebody part of us who does, she is chaplain to Ironman events and triathlons. And she's done the, the Greenland triathlon or something, one of these wild ones, but she's chaplain to that and part of us. It ranges far and wide. It's
something that I think must be quite important, especially in top flight sports, professional football, where you're seeing players coming from places like, I don't know, South America, across Africa, across Europe. A lot of those people are probably used to having somebody to, speak about their faith with. And if they're coming to a club that beforehand can't cater for that whatsoever, it must be quite an alien environment for a player who's always grown up. Let's say South America, let's say they've grown up as a Catholic. That's such a big part of their identity, isn't it? So if they're having a bit of a rough day, talking to a football manager, possibly 10 years ago, it might have been a little bit rough around the edges. It might not have helped them.
Yes, exactly. But it's broader than that, though. The whole pastoral thing, and that's true not just at obviously the elite level. That there are needs. Somebody once said to me at Wasps, it's great to have somebody who's got time to listen. And in pro sport, elite sport, you got everything so busy. There were times when I would go in and people were very ready to talk. They got time to talk, etc. Other times you went in, there was a big game coming up at the weekend. You could see everybody's heads were down. They were just, running around like headless chickens trying to get everything in place so this thing would happen. And there were issues coming up and all this sort of thing. But in the middle of all that, people have got their own issues, the family relationships, bereavements, you name it, family things. It's all there, and they're normal. They have all people in sport have all the normal things that you and I face on a daily basis. Plus, there's all the issues of why wasn't I picked this week? I've got an injury. I might never get back in the team. My career might be over. All those sort of things. Contracts coming up. Where will I be this time next year? How does that affect my wife, my family, etc., etc.? A whole lot of pastoral issues that are there, and generally speaking, they have HR departments, not in all professional clubs by a long way, but bigger ones do. But they just deal with legal things really on them for the main. They have sports psychologists, but they're there to deal with the way you play the sport, basically. Although some of them will say the pastoral issues are things that often get put onto them, and they're not necessarily trained for that. We come in to offer that in the name of Jesus, obviously, because we're an unashamedly Christian organization, but to offer that pastoral care. But that's equally true at local community club level. I think of an instance which happened just a year ago, where one local rugby club in the north of England, and we're dealing with young men in terms of the male game, and we all know that suicide is a big issue among young men. And this club had a suicide in one of their young players, and the local vicar there was people from the club who were very involved in the local church, and he just said, well, if I can help in any way, I'm very happy to, as you would, And he suddenly discovered that the club had elected him as chaplain or appointed him as chaplain. But even before that happened, there was another lad in the club had attempted suicide. And that affects, then it's not just the individuals and their families, it affects the whole relationships in that club and the whole community.
Yeah.
And so it's a great opportunity to be in there and minister in the name of Jesus to folks and make the church relevant to their lives, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
With them and alongside them, saying, God's here, he cares for you, he wants the best for you, and we're here in his name to help you.
It's great having somebody to unload to talk to, even if some of these people aren't necessarily religious. Just having an ear that's going to listen, especially in the case of the poor lad that was contemplated suicide. That person just wanted someone to have a conversation with. Do you know what I should imagine? Anyway, it's just wanted to talk to somebody who was going to empathize and understand their struggle. It's with sports, obviously you kind of relate more to the people that are the local level. So our Ben Norris is sports chaplain at Harlow Rugby.
Yeah.
I would find myself relating to people that that play at Harlow Rugby Club, because I understand their life. I suppose they're not in the media every day. They're just playing rugby at the weekend.
Yeah.
But when it comes to professional level sports, I am probably just as guilty as everybody else as seeing a professional sportsman as whatever their job role is within the team. Do you know what I mean? And that's not what that person is it? It's just part of their life. It's just probably a small part of their life, really.
Yeah, and they go home. They've got families. They've got all the pressures that everybody else has. They've got mortgages. They've got people, and they've got extra pressures. I mean, everybody has extra pressures in their jobs relative to their jobs. But if you're well known, people want to know you. People are around you trying to get things off you. All sorts of things that
I suppose they're playing for their job as well, aren't they? A lot of them are, there's always some other person behind them that wants that position. So it's a stressful life being a professional sports person.
It's interesting you say that, because there's back in whenever it was 2007, it must have been 2007, the World Cup was coming up. And the Songs of Praise were doing a program on it, and they asked me if I related to rugby, and they asked me if I would be interviewed for it, which I was. And after we'd done the interview, which was actually up at rugby school, which was great, because it was the first time I'd been to rugby school, and then I met another Christian player who I knew of but didn't know before that, and that was good. But the guy who was doing the production said, would it be possible for us to come down, rather than just having a blank interview, to come down to Wasps and film some training? So I asked the club. They said, yeah, that's fine. So they came down, and after we'd done the filming in the club that morning at the training ground, we went off for lunch. They invited me to go to lunch with them, and the guy who was doing the production said, it suddenly struck me. He said, although you're in a team game and you're playing for the team, you're also competing with the very guys that you're on the same team in. Because in football, there's only one goalkeeper. I know there's two, because you have one on the bench, but essentially there's only one goalkeeper going to go out there with the first 11. In rugby, there's only going to be one scrum half. In cricket, there'll be a couple of bowlers, but there's limited. And you always know there are other people, because there's got to be, in case you get injured or whatever, who are competing with for that place in the team. So you've got your responsibility to the team, which sometimes is to put your sort of needs second to the needs of the team. I mean, you may say in cricket, somebody, you go out there and try and get some quick runs. If you get out, it doesn't matter, but it matters to you because you're judged on how you perform at the end of the day. I've seen this time and time again. Guys know this is the guy who would take my place if he could. And you always know as you go on, no matter how good you are, you're not going to last forever. And there are guys coming up underneath who want your place. And once you're gone, you're gone. I remember the David Kirk, who was the captain of the All Blacks in the very first Rugby World Cup back in 76. No, it wasn't. When was it? Oh, no, I'm talking rubbish there. That was 90 something. 96, wasn't it? And he, no, it wasn't as late as, anyway, cut that bit out.
Whenever it was.
David Kirk, who was the captain of the All Blacks in the very first Rugby World Cup, and they won it. He was being interviewed. It was in a book all about the World Cup. And he said, a few of us are remembered, but none of us are missed. And it was very telling. And I've quoted that to people in different sports, cricket, rugby, and they've all said, yeah, that's perfectly true. I remember talking to one guy who'd played at London Irish and had played on the wing and retired. A year later, he was back in London, out for a drink with the guy who'd played with him on the other wing, as it were, his counterpart. But this guy was still playing at London Irish. And he said, we were in this bar having a drink, and there were some Irish supporters came in, London Irish supporters. And they went over to his friend and asked him for his autograph and completely ignored him. He said a year before, it had been all over me. So it's a very ephemeral, that level of sport is very ephemeral. You soon, when you're gone, most people are forgotten. You'll suddenly say, oh, I came across a program I was sorting out this week. And I came across a WASP program from 2009. Strangely enough, it was against Bristol. We played them on Friday night. And it was in March, but there were some people in there. I suddenly realized in the team, I'd forgotten about them, and I knew well enough at the time, but you don't keep in contact with literally everybody. None of us do we? When you're at uni or whatever, you don't keep in contact with everybody, but it's very easy because there's such a throughput. There's always going to be a new number 9 or new centre forward or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be difficult as well. If as you're in your professional career and you're getting on a bit, especially in sport. Well, rugby you can play a little bit later on, can't you? But football, these people are ending their career in, they're talking about how they're old in their early 30s. I think I'm 32. I think if somebody was saying to me, look, you ain't got the legs to play anymore, this kid who's 18's he's better than you, I think I'd take that really bad. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how I'd handle that, but I suppose that's the reality of their sport, and they might be prepared for that. But yeah, it's a stressful thing, I should imagine, just being told that
particularly in the academies, the young lads. I mean, in football now, lads are signed up at 12, and even and they go through to about 18, and something like it's 80 or 90 odd percent, I think, in football academies never make it into the professional game.
Yeah.
At that stage, you're being told you're being rejected, really. When you've built your whole life to be and most of these lads, their desire is to be a professional footballer.
Who was the? It's really bad that I've forgotten. Was it the young lad? Was it Man City? The young lad played for recently, who sadly committed suicide. I can't remember who it was, but he was in the academy. I can't remember what team it was. He was in the academy, and he's being told that he's good enough to play for a professional team. He didn't make it in the end, and I think God, that's a rough. If that's what you've believed for years and years, that's a rough situation.
Prepare somebody for that. When you're that age, it's still devastating, isn't it? Because your whole life and you've done nothing but that from 12 or whatever. You've been going, your parents have been running you around. You feel you've let your parents down because they've invested so much time and money in you. You feel you've let, yourself down. You feel you've let your mates down because they were all going to be seeing you, and you feel a failure. And it's very difficult to prepare a 17, 18-year-old for that sort of rejection.
And then on the flip side, you've got
you can be there alongside people and try and help them and work through that.
Yeah,
interesting. This is a complete aside. It's interesting that people often say, well, what about players coming to faith? There are a lot of guys who come into the game with a faith, and part of our job and part of the responsibility of sport is to help them maintain that faith, and that's not easy either, because the very schedules you've got don't allow you to have regular input in the local church quite often, and it's difficult because everybody knows you as, if you are sort of fairly prominent, he plays for so-and-so, and that's all people become interested in. With the best will in the world, Christians are the same as everybody else in some instances,
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things is there are one or two who come to faith while they're playing, but the point where people seem to come, and this is purely circumstantial from my observation within sport, the point where people tend to come to faith is when they finish playing. Now that may be because of injury, maybe because they're rejected or kicked out or whatever, or just the careers come to an end, which is an equally difficult time. A lot at that point finish up and drink, in depression or whatever. Cricket has had traditionally, and not traditionally, that's a bad word, but historically, a really huge problem with suicide after the end of careers. You're so intense, spending almost the whole summer with your friends, and then you're back into with your club mates. You're back into pre-season training pretty quickly. Your whole life revolves around that, and all of a sudden, bang, it's gone. And what do you do? You're not trained for anything else, generally speaking. I mean, the people like the Professional Cricketers Association, professional footballers, all these professional associations are very good these days at getting guys to start to think about that. But you can't make them. Not all of them do. And if you say your late 20s and this happens, I can think of lads in rugby who have had injuries, and that's it. And your late 20s, you were thinking, I've got another few years yet. I'll think about that further down the line. So it's at that crisis point that people seem to come to faith. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Songs of Praise had 3 ex-Welsh internationals, well-known guys, who were all on there, all of whom have come to faith after. And we've seen quite a bit of that down in Wales, ex-players coming to faith. Because it's what fills the gap, really. And they suddenly discovered their life was meaningless without their sport. They're looking for new meaning, and what better meaning is there? Well, there's no better meaning in life than finding God through Jesus, is there?
So what's Sports Chaplaincy UK? They're in a local or professional sports outfit. Are Sports Chaplaincy trying to bring people to the faith, or are you there representing and seeing if people organically come?
Maxim is very simple. We are pastorally proactive and spiritually reactive.
Okay.
In other words, it's not, it depends on which part of the UK you're in. Somewhere like Northern Ireland, where faith is very much more on the agenda than it is, in England, you can be, I mean, we are overtly Christian. We don't deny the fact we're Christian. People know that, where we stand.
Yeah.
But we're not there in the first instance as evangelists. We're there on mission to bring the love and compassion of God into that situation.
Okay.
But that is our prime purpose. But we do it through getting alongside people, supporting people, encouraging people. But if they want to talk spiritual things, only too happy. And in that case, very happy to share where we're coming from.
Yeah.
And one of the things we can do as well is where there are Christians in the club, obviously we can support them, but they are there. Often churches will say, can you get us so-and-so to come and speak and all that sort of thing. And that's fine. And I understand why, but it's not why. If God's put somebody in a club, a top club, football club or whatever, who is a Christian, why are they there? God's not put them there so they can come speak in the local church. God's put them there as he's put you in your job, me when I was a vet. He's put us there and equipped us to be there and allowed us to be there so that we can be his witness in that situation. So one of the things we can do is with the Christian lads that are around and female sport Christian women that are involved there as well, is to be a support to them and encourage them in their mission.
Yeah.
Their outreach. And what it is to be a Christian in that situation, because it's not always been thought through clearly. How do you get on? I know one guy who is a great Christian guy, he's a good friend, and had married, was there when he met his wife for the first time actually, and lovely Christian girl. And he came home from one game and he thought he'd done quite well, and she absolutely hammered him, told him off, and he couldn't understand why. And she'd been watching it on the television, and she said, "You're on television," and he'd sworn when he was on the pitch, in the heat.
Right. Okay.
All guys, and she said, "Don't ever do that again," because people what you're saying on the television. We always needed our wives to keep us under control, but what it is to be a Christian in that circumstance, and particularly in contact sports where you're going to get overheated at times, you're going to lose it. Hands up anybody who's never done that. But we're there to support these lads and women and help them and to work out what it is. When I was at Wasps, we had a small group of guys, mainly from Wasps, but one or two came from Harlequins as well. And there were some semi-pro players locally, Christian lads. We met every fortnight to Bible study, share together, because there's certain things you can't share in a home group church. If in the good old days of Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, if you were a Christian playing there, you couldn't go into your local church house group and say, Alex Ferguson is really driving me mad over this contract. You can't say that, but you can to other players, and they can say, "We'll be praying for you when you go in next Wednesday or whatever to talk this through." And I've seen that happen. Not in Manchester United, obviously, but in a local club, seen that happen where guys supporting each other, and that was great. And it's working out what it is to be a Christian in this circumstance, and that's a great privilege to help them with that as well. So there's all those aspects to the job of chaplaincy, really.
I think it's so important for people who they don't have faith to see how Christians. I'm a normal person. So when I'm at work, I'll get the usual, the debate about why I'm a Christian, and we all know how it plays out. It's it's trying, but I try my best. But I think it's important for people to see as well that I'm just a person. I've got problems. Just because I'm a Christian, don't mean my life's going to be easy. In fact, it could be the other way. And I think I think that there's a certain stigma, isn't there, that you tell people you're a Christian, and some people think that you think you're better than them, but it's far from it. Like, I couldn't, I'm a man with many faults, as it were. Like you need to understand. Well, not you, but people need to understand that I'm just a guy. Come and talk to me, and we'll figure it out. It's like leading. I don't want to say leading by example. That's not the word I'm looking for, but I'm not going to push you into it. But if you see me just being normal who happens to be Christian, then surely there's got to be some benefit to that, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. And there are other ways as well. I think of one instance, a good friend of mine who's chaplain at not a Premiership club, but at actually a Championship club. He has for a long while now held pre-match prayers because they have one or two Christian players. But then some of the other players said, "Can we come into that?" Now they're not praying for a win; they're just praying that they'll be able to give the best and do the best. And there are guys coming into that. And in fact, they've had an instance where a guy's gone to another club and he said, "Can I join in on the phone to the pre-match prayer?" And he said to the other guys, "Is that okay?" They said, "Yeah, of course it is." So, and that's going on now. I mean, he's actually allowed in the club, and he has his tests, his COVID tests. But he's at games, and they're still doing the pre-match prayers, and that is a witness in itself. And becomes a key thing that people, and as I say, guys who don't profess to have any faith, I think prayer is one of our best evangelistic weapons, to be honest.
Okay.
we underuse. I've never met anybody who had said, "Don't pray for me," and you cannot. That's one of the things we can do to somebody's injured. Say, "I'll pray for you. Do you want me to do it now, or do it when I get home, or whatever?" And you get different responses, but nobody's ever said no.
It's a very caring thing, isn't it? When again, if you haven't got faith, if someone comes up to you and says, "Can I pray for you?" You're saying, "Look, I care enough for you to ask God if you help with this." So I think that's excellent, to be honest with you. You touched just then on COVID, having his COVID tests.
Yeah.
How has COVID affected the way sports chaplaincy? Yeah, the way sports chaplaincy operates, because obviously a lot of these sports clubs aren't open, and that's something that I struggle with. Like, part of my my daily routine, I might not look it, but I'm down the gym sort of three times a week. I miss that so much at the moment, and I don't have the motivation to do it at home. I just can't do it at home. So yeah. Well, how's the current pandemic affected things for?
Yeah, for us, there's two levels. There's one for us as an organisation, and in actual fact, I mean, I think as we were talking earlier about within the church, you were looking at doing things certain ways, and this has accelerated it. And we were looking at what we did online and how we could develop that. And of course, bang, we had no option. But in fact, we have thrived. Praise the Lord. I mean, we give thanks to God. Thanks to God for Zoom. I mean, this. We run induction courses, as we call them, for potential chaplains, people who want to be chaplains or interested in chaplaincy, sports chaplaincy. And we've done several hundred people through that this last year. Now, some of that we could not have done because in the past we've pulled people into a central place. You follow me? And we've done it in a day. So people had to put that day aside and have that. Now we're doing it online and often over 3 evenings.
Right. Okay.
Now we had to put that together pretty quickly because but and it's had to be refined. And I'm not saying it was perfect from the start, but we've seen people come through that. As I said, just last night, 2 more new chaplaincies in place in Wales. There've been new chaplaincy placements going through. We've grown during that period. God's been very gracious financially with us, and we've come through it. We balanced the books for last year. Which is for 2020, that's our financial year. That's been good. We had our conference as usual, but online, which also meant that people could come in from Australia, New Zealand. We have one from the Ukraine. So we were going to do an international conference anyway, but it saved us money, to be honest, doing things on Zoom. So this year we already decided, because it was uncertain where things would be in the autumn, we'll do it online. Next year, hopefully, we'll get back to doing a live conference, as it were. But this year, again, having spent time working out how to do it and learned certain things through it, then we're doing that. So from that point of view, from the organisation, we've seen growth. We've seen new ways of doing things. And of course, as I say, for meetings like our trustees meetings, rather than having to spend a whole day traveling for an hour and a half meeting, we can do it just an hour and a half out people's day. So it made us rethink a lot of those things. But also at ground level, what we found is there are differences really. There's at the elite level where sport has gone on, Where chaplains have been already fairly well embedded in the club, they've got deeper involved. That would apply to myself at Northamptonshire County Cricket. More involved, although obviously not seeing people to the same extent. I was able to go to games last year because I'm part of the staff, so I was welcome at the ground. And you could have a whole stand to yourself. Social distancing was no problem. I didn't go in the changing rooms or anything, but I could see people outside because obviously you spend a lot of time outside when you're playing cricket. So where they were well embedded, where they weren't so well embedded, it's been more difficult. But again, online contact, and we've been trying to get our chaplains to think how you can keep in contact with people, and so that when you go back, you can slip into it. At the local level, the semi-pro level, where you'll get clubs. I remember talking to somebody it was a little sort of market town just west of London, and it was a semi-pro rugby club, and I knew the coach there and was chatting to him about chaplaincy, and he said the problem is for the first team, I'd love a chaplain, but the problem is for the first team, some of my guys come from Bristol, some of my guys come from Essex, they come in 2 nights a week to train straight from work, get out of the cars, train, get back in the cars, go home. They're here once a fortnight during the season. That's as much as you see of them. But in those cases, I know one case in a football club, a semi-pro football club, where the chaplain's been helping the groundsman because he needed some help. And so getting to build relationships in those ways, keeping in touch with the chairman, that sort of thing. So that's worked well. At community level, amateur level, then clubs have sort of maintained ways of keeping together, although they've not been able to meet. So it's been different things, but generally speaking, it's gone well, and it's been a good year for us in many ways.
It's provided, I suppose, an opportunity to think outside the box and how you can, you can help out in other ways or reach out in other ways, I suppose. It's interesting what you said about how you got thrown into having to do things online. That's like absolutely true. I should imagine churches weren't at the top of the government's priority when they said, that's it, we're not doing anything anymore ever again. It made people think like, oh, how are we going to provide a church service to people now? And I dare say because of that, because we, churches up and down the country have had to adapt and stream, services online and prepare videos and stuff like that. I dare say that going forward, when, these services restart again, you're going to find a lot more churches that at the same time they've got a heavy online presence because of the past year. And I wonder how much of God's work's in that. Do you know what I mean? Because that's further evangelism at that point. You've now got an online audience as well as, the guys that turn up on a Sunday.
But it's a bit like Joseph, isn't it? Saying to his brothers, what you meant for harm, God turned for good.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoever, I'm not blaming the devil for I don't know, it's a result of the fallenness of nature, all these diseases and everything in my book. But, what potentially, and it's not potentially harmful, it's been very harmful, but what, is harmful, God can turn the circumstances or difficult circumstances, God can turn those around and use them. And because he is, almighty at the end. But we've got to be responsive to that as well. I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? And those who have sat back and said, oh, well, we can't do it, then in a sense, they've not seized the opportunity to think outside the box. And it's been the same with chaplaincy. I think there's one lady down in Wales who's chaplain to what's called a pan-ability football club. In other words, able-bodied people and disabled folk, a lot of them with learning disabilities, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. She runs homework clubs online. Because herself has 3 children with disabilities. Mm-hmm. She's an amazing woman. And her church are incredibly supportive of her and have helped in all sorts of ways. She was advising some guy because his wife was busy, was away. I think she wasn't well, was advising him how to cook and all this sort of thing. See that? You wouldn't see that in an elite club. I don't think, anyway. But you see these things happening, and it's quite amazing, and it's all showing the love of God, and people know that because we come from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
My favourite text, sorry for chaplaincy, is when Jesus says, "I am among you as one who serves." Mm-hmm. We're here to serve. We're not here to get anything out of this. We're volunteers. We're part of the club, and we're not looking for anything. We're simply looking to support you and serve you. And that particularly at elite level, it comes as a shock to some people because they're just used to folk being there because they're going to get, whether it's kudos, whether it's tickets, whether it's whatever, whether they can say, I know so and so, and I know so and so. That's not what we're in it for. We're in it simply to serve in the name of Jesus. And
it must be a big shock, to be honest. I was listening to the Peter Crouch podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard it recently.
I was going to say, is this an edition of the Peter Crouch podcast?
he was talking about entourages, like these players have got huge entourages, but a lot of them, again, very young. And, they've started to attract all these people that become sort of hanger-ons and, they're getting something from the player. So, like somebody that comes along just goes, look, I just want to help out. It must be very alien to them. Do you know what I mean? They're just, I'm not asking for anything, just.
But it's so biblical, isn't it? It's the story of the prodigal son, isn't it? While he got money, while he was famous, whatever, he had lots of friends. But when all that ran out, who's there? And we hope the chaplains are still there. I mean, we've all had that experience when we've been around this job for a while, of people who we knew previously. I think one guy rang me up on a Monday morning and just said, I need somebody to talk to. And he'd left the club, 3 years beforehand, which was the first name that came into my mind. He got my phone number, he rang me, we got together, we worked some stuff through. That is the time when they need a friend. And while ever you're successful, and that's what I say, that's why a lot of them don't come to faith while they're successful, What else do they need? They've got everything. But then when everybody else disappears and you're left with nothing, you find out who your real friends are, to one thing, but also you find that God's still there. Never,
it must be that end of career situation must just be surreal. Do you know what I mean? Like you're saying, where you've gone from having everything to possibly that's it. Like it's all done with now. Do you know what I mean?
There was a film that was made of a program years ago for the BBC called After the Final Whistle. It was Alan Hansen that made it. And he interviewed several folk, and those who have an older disposition like me will remember Razor Ruddock, who played at Liverpool. He was a pretty hard guy, and he just fell apart after the career ends. And he makes the point, one day you're running out in front of 30,000 and getting the adulation, and the next day, what do you do? And half the time now at that level of sport, everything's done for you. You've got a toothache, we'll organize a dentist. You need to see a doctor, we'll organize it for you. And he would say he'd never done half of that stuff for himself. Since he was in the academy, and so all of a sudden nobody wants to know you, but it feels that way. It feels that way. Where'd you get the buzz from? Where'd you get the buzz of running out in front of 30,000 people? I mean, we can't imagine the average person like you and me what that feels like. But then suddenly not to have it. I remember talking to one guy who played for a rugby player who'd been dropped by England, and we were talking about how, what it's like. And literally it is, you get a phone call and say, well, it depends on the coach, but in those days, the phone call, he said, he rings you and he says, you're not be picked. If you want to talk it through, give me a ring, but you can never get him. And one day you're coming in on the team bus to Twickenham, the next day you're buying a ticket, It's as brutal as that at times. And okay, it's great because you can say I played for England, but it's that, it's hard to take, I think. And I know people would say, well, they're making enough money and they are, doing well, but there's still a need there. And that, I believe wherever there's a need, wherever there's people, God wants to be there reaching out to them.
Do you think that, during in the academies and in training and stuff like that, that the message needs to be put across a little bit more, that this is a finite career? Like, I know that it might be a bad example because a lot of players end up bankrupt, but in America, in the NFL, the vast majority of these players have to go through college and they have to get their grades in college before they're given like the scholarship or whatever for the team. I think that's a good way of doing things, isn't it? Like preparing these guys for a career outside of possible football, because it ain't going to last forever. You're going to be 20s, early 30s for a very short amount of time, and then what you do after that, that's down to you.
There's, as I say, there's a lot of good stuff goes on with that now, and scholarship programs, in football, particularly education programs, because these lads are so young. In rugby, experience was that most of the lads, and same in cricket, were at school. In fact, in rugby and cricket, in truth, a large percentage come from private school background. So, they're encouraged in that, and they come in after school, as it were. Their playing career starts pretty well after they finish school. But in football, you can have lads 18 who are playing first team games for Manchester City, Everton, whatever. And they may technically still be having to do their studies, but if the coach says, I want you playing against Barcelona on Wednesday, the studies go by the board, don't they? Because they've got no choice.
I would definitely have taken that offer.
And it's understandable. You're young. And also, how many actually listen? How many of us listened when we were 17, 18 to people who were trying to warn us what life was like? We knew it's the old Mark Twain thing, isn't it? He said, when I was supposed to have said anyway, when I was 16, I thought my father was a fool. When I was 21, I realized how much he'd learned in 5 years, And it's only later you see the wisdom of what was being said to us. And we're young, and there's all sorts of temptations. And when you've got money as well,
you feel like you've conquered the world, don't you? I suppose.
Yeah.
So what's
you're immortal at that age.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the Sports Chaplaincy UK's sort of long-term goals? What's in the pipeline?
A very simple sort of strategy, mission, as it were, to see an our sort of strapline is to see an expression of God's love and companion in every community called sport.
Okay.
Getting the church to think of sport as a community of people, not as an activity. Which it is, whether it be the local gym, and we're into gym chaplaincy as well. There was an organisation called Fit Lives which did that. They were wanting to. We talked with. They came to us and said, "Can we merge with you?" And which has happened. And one of their trustees became one of the guys that started it. Actually, is now one of our trustees, which is great. And we're seeing gym chaplain. That's done more in teams from a local church. So that is our long-term aim. As I say, we're just over 550 chaplains, I think, at the moment. It's always variable, say 2 new ones last night, but the others dropping out, so people move on, sort of thing. But we're looking over the next 3 years to see that grow to about 1,000. That's our aim. I'm not saying it's up to God at the end of the day, but you've got to have some, if you don't have an aim, you'll never. What's the saying? If you don't aim for something, you'll never hit anything, Yeah. And we're looking to continue that growth, which has been quite rapid over this last while. And we want to develop the structures that will enable that to happen and still be able to, deliver the quality of chaplaincy that's there. And what the other thing we're trying to do now is, we've got a problem, really, not an issue. We've got a problem that we're probably better known in sport than we are in the church.
Okay.
And our profile, because we work very closely, the money comes from sporting bodies, the English football bodies, Scottish football bodies, racing welfare in horse racing, put money into us to support certain posts that we're employed by us, but they provide the finance for it. So we've got a good footprint there within sport, but within the church we don't have such a big footprint, and that's understandable. We're unique. This SP business, we've got a unique selling point to sport. We're providing something nobody else does, and we provide it free. Okay, so that's easy. With the church, we're just one other mission organization, para-church organization, however you want to see us, alongside a whole lot of others. So I know as a minister, when I was a minister, you'd have another 10 things drop on your desk every day. All of them were good and, valuable contributions to the kingdom, I'm sure, but you can't do everything, so you had to try and decide. But alongside that, we believe that the church is God's plan A for mission. And what we're looking for now is to work with churches in different areas. We're working more and more closely with the Church of England. They've designated 5 sporting dioceses I think it's 5, and we're working with them. One particular one we're working quite closely with. But what we'd like to see in different areas is a local church that becomes what we're calling a champion church, that takes on this idea that sport is a community to be reached. It's a massive community. And a lot of the people in the church are already involved in it. So they don't have to go anywhere, they're already involved. But how they can get more involved with that, but also then, rather than us having to go around and train people to be chaplains in gyms or whatever, we could train people in the church to train others, if you follow me. And they then spread that message to other local churches. Not they do it all, but they champion outreach into sport through chaplaincy and support of individuals.
So you mentioned gym chaplaincy. How would that work? Would that be the same as a club, like a chaplain at a gym that you can reach out to, or somebody that?
It's slightly different. I mean, obviously, because chaplains are volunteers in a club, you can do, we say, half a day a week plus games, etc. You can go. That sort of gym's different because people are coming and going. So basically, and I'm not done gym chaplaincy. The way it works, you get a team of 4 or 5 people from a particular church. Who go into a gym, obviously with the gym's permission. You get, it's like with a club, we go to them, we talk to them and explain what, and if they say, yeah, we'll have it, then you get a team of 4 or 5 people who go in sort of on a rota basis and just get to know people. It may be people in the church who already belong to that gym.
Yeah, okay.
But they're there to provide things, to offer opportunities. We can provide mental health training, awareness training, and that sort of thing, so that they can just be there to listen to people. Maybe they have times when somebody's there just to listen, and people can. Gyms. I joined a gym. I promised myself I was going to get back to join the gym. My wife, I should say, died 3.5 years ago, sadly. And she, when I retired and we moved up to Northampton. She wouldn't let me go to a gym because she knows I'm very competitive against myself. If I did it in 1 minute, 2 minutes yesterday, I want to do it in 1 minute 59 seconds today. So she was always frightened I was going to sort of overstretch myself. But I decided I needed to get back to the gym. I joined one on the 10th of January, 2020. Would you believe? I remember the day because then I came down with a slight infection, which stopped me going, and with other things, I never got back there again. Before lockdown, and of course that's been it, since then. So, but yeah, so I don't spend a lot of time in gyms, but people hang around. There's cafes and that sort of thing. There's ways of doing it, and I know somebody who runs alpha courses in gyms.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's a good idea.
And that's a YMCA gym, to be fair, but it's possible to do all sorts of things, and well-being courses and these sort of things, which we can provide training for, or put people into training for, put them in the way of training, but always bringing, that Christian background to it. And again, ready to talk about that if people want to talk spiritual things.
I think it's a great idea having a church presence in gyms because, that over the past sort of, 10, 15 years, personal health and, fitness, etc. has been such a big message. And it also goes into mental health. For me, that's part of the reason I go to the gym, because it, helps me just to get rid of everything that's, up here. So, yeah, I think having a presence in the gym is a great idea. It's an awesome idea. And people naturally come to you. Like, I suppose it's the same as in the sports clubs. People they'll be curious about it. They'll come and speak to a chaplain when they see him about, and I think it's an excellent idea.
It's forming relationships, and it's great. And Jesus said, "I want you to have life in all its fullness. I've come to have life in all its fullness," and that means mental well-being, physical well-being.
Yeah,
but that's why we pray for people. If we didn't believe God wanted people to be well physically, we wouldn't pray for them for healing, would we?
No.
So, but the mental side is important as well. That's all part of the wholeness, the shalom, the peace that he comes to bring. And of course, there's the spiritual element of that as well. And that can be introduced. I'll tell a story of years ago when the film The Passion was around, yeah. And there was a good friend. He's now actually leads sports chaplaincy in New Zealand. He is a Kiwi, and he was chaplain at a rugby league club up in the north of England. And there was one of the coaches who he knew well, who was a Pacific Islander, who was a very committed Christian guy. And together they said, well, wouldn't it be good if we could take the lads to see this film? So they went to the head coach and they said, hey, this is a great film for rugby league players. Jesus shows the commitment, sacrifice, all the values that we want to get into these guys. So he said, yeah. So one morning they took them all off to the cinema to watch The Passion. Great. And he thought, how can I follow that up? And this is where you've got to be creative. And not everybody can do this. And it's different things in different clubs with different people, according to your speaking. He was good at it. And so he said to the coach, it was Holy Week coming up, the week before Easter.
Yeah.
And he said, would it be possible to have a bit of space with the lads just to debrief on the film, see what they made of it? And he said, yeah, you can have 20 minutes, I think it was. So he wrote to all the players saying, you watched the film. If you could ask Jesus one question, what would it be? And he got all these responses. And he based what he didn't go in and talk to them and present. He answered their questions, he addressed their questions. It went on for longer than the 20 minutes,
Yeah.
So it's those ways in which, and there are always people, and that happened to me at the same time that film was around. I was at Wasps, and lads were asking, did that really happen? Because it became a big thing for men. It was a very macho film.
Yeah.
And there are these things happening around us that people will come to you as a chaplain and ask the questions, which gives you a chance to share, which is a great opportunity. And I remember sitting in a beer garden in Headingley, feeling completely out of place, because Headingley is a lot of students in that area. It was a lovely afternoon. It was towards the end of the season. We were playing on the Saturday, and I was actually staying in the hotel where the lads was. I paid for it myself, where the lads were staying, because I've been sort of following it. It was a long story why I was there. A couple of them wanted this guy I know particularly well, and I'm very friendly with, a Christian guy. He said, there's a couple of lads, we were going to get together, want to go down to the Headingley. Can you give them a lift? I said, yeah. So we all went down and we sat in this beer garden for about 2 hours. And most of the conversation was spiritual things, not initiated by us.
Yeah.
It just happened that way, And what a privilege that is. What a privilege to share Jesus in those sort of circumstances. One of them later went to play down in France. He'd been around faith in his early years, but had drifted away from it, came back to faith, not through us, through the Lord, obviously, and through the witness of other Christian guys down in France who he was playing with. But what a privilege this job is, to be in sport, which I love, to be talking about the Lord, who I love.
Yeah.
As I say, being sports chaplaincy is such a privilege, and want to encourage folk. It's not for everybody, but if you're interested, support it. Pray for your local chaplains. The ways of finding. Look at our website, Sports Chaplaincy UK. You'll find it. Support us. If you want to donate, that will be great. We're looking for more and more people to donate because we want to expand more and more. And that obviously is limited by the number of people we employ is limited by the amount of money we've got. And if we get more and more chaplains, we need more and more support for those chaplains. We need to be training them, supporting them, everything. But what you're contributing to is seeing, as I say, God's love and compassion being right there at the center of the world of sport, which is tremendous.
It certainly sounds like you're doing a great job. Sports Chaplaincy UK as a whole it's really important work.
God's doing a great job, I think, in sport, and we're privileged to be part of that.
Yeah, joining in with it.
Yeah, we're co-workers, we're partners in this. God works, isn't it? Sadly, I wish he did it all himself most of the time.
Yeah. If he could just edit some videos together, that'd be great. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah. So, last question. Start wrapping it up. I ask everybody the same last question. We're 3 months into 2021 now, but COVID aside, because we all want to be COVID free, what are your personal wishes for 2021?
2021. It's a good question, really. And I think for the church, because it goes in different areas, doesn't it? For the church, grasp this opportunity to be creative, that we don't just say we're back to what we did before. And we find the ways of doing that we are open to our neighbours and our friends, because I think there'll be all sorts of questions coming out of this. And we've a long way to go with the aftermath of it. And that the compassion, that there will be more and more compassion around. There's a lot in our society. Let's not knock it. There are a lot of good people out there. There are some who want and that's clear. But there are a lot of good people out there who care about these things, and there will be a kinder, more caring society. I don't think that just happens. I don't think evil goes away. It doesn't go away till the Lord returns, but that we see boundaries pushed back in that way by the compassion and the love of God being more evident in all sorts of ways, and that the church can grasp those opportunities. I think that will be my greatest wish for this year. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent answer. Yeah, I think I'm fully on board with that one. I don't know what to say to that one. Yeah, spot on. All right, we've been going for quite a while. We've been going for what, hour and 20 minutes, give or take.
I apologize for that. You're talking to about 15 minutes here. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating one. I've been looking forward to this, to be honest. It's it's definitely something that interests me, like how chaplains within professional organizations work. I always wondered to myself, like, how did they get into this role? Do you know what I mean? So this one for me was, I've really looked forward to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks.
Thank you to GodCentral and all the folks there for the support of Ben. He's doing a great job there, and he does some other bits and pieces for us within Sports Chaplaincy of the UK as well. And it's good to look up with you all again. I had a great time when we came over for Ben's commissioning, and wish God's blessing on you this year as well. May you prosper in him. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll certainly try. And for everyone watching, remember to comment, like, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.